Lisa Rupp.
And welcome back to the Law News Network. I'm your host, Amy Dash. We were just watching the trial of Louis Toledo in Florida, who is accused of murdering his wife and her 2 children. If you'd like to continue watching that trial, you can hit the red live button on the upper left side of our site, LawNewz.com. But now we want to get back to this trial of Quentin TELLIS out of Mississippi, who is accused in the capital murder of Jessica Chambers, a young woman who was going to get some gas, going to get something to eat, but sadly never returned home and was found walking out of the woods after her car had been set on fire. 98% of her body badly burned, and she died shortly thereafter, but not before telling first responders who set her on fire. A man named Eric, according to her, but she said she did not know his last name. I'm joined here by our LawNewz trial analyst, Julie Rendelman, and Jonna Spillbor, a criminal defense attorney here in New York. And we were talking about this mysterious guy, Eric, and how basically just the fact that she uttered his name so many times and seemed to be aware of who she was when she did so and of what was going on put some reasonable doubt in our minds as to whether they have the right man. Expand upon, Jonna, because you said you didn't think it was a big deal. Expand upon how does the prosecution overcome that hurdle?
So, and I'm definitely wearing my, former prosecutor hat today, because I'm already convinced, which we shouldn't do on day one, that he's guilty, but for purposes of this argument. So what I think the jury's gonna have to do, or the prosecution's gonna have to do when tasking what the jury how much weight they should give this evidence, is the prosecution's gonna have to say, look, okay, her body was burning, 98% of it was on fire, and she uttered somebody else's name, and you have this evidence over here. But look at the evidence that we have over here. We have the pinging of the cell phone tower. We have that the defendant put himself together with her 2 hours before her murder. We know where he was exactly at the time of her death. And we have all of this circumstantial evidence in one pile over here, and then you have one other piece of evidence in another pile over here. And ladies and gentlemen of the jury, it's your job to weigh the evidence and come to the conclusion that he is guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. The jury is going to be able to do that. They're going to say, which evidence do we find more reliable than others? And if I'm the prosecution, I'm going to argue that whatever name she spit out as she was dying is not that reliable.
But when you talk about somebody, and you said this was someone who was saying who killed them in their final moments, and sometimes that is just so believable because that's what people want to hear when they arrive on the scene, and also that's what the person who's suffering wants to communicate to the police. Catch this person who did this to me, right? And so when you compare that to cell phone pinging technology, what do you think carries
You're a
more
little
weight,
biased
Julie?
against the cell phone
I am,
ping.
and Julie said she's for the cell phone.
I'm
think that
very into cell phone records.
there have been so many cases, though, where it's proved to be unreliable. So why do you think that it's such a great piece of circumstantial evidence?
Just in terms of cell phone records, I think that the reason cell phone records or cell phone evidence, I think it matters. There are many factors that affect cell phones, and that includes kind of where you are, whether you're in a city or whether you're in a suburb. There's many things that come into play, and they're going to come into play in here in making at least the jury help them in weighing whether or not this is reliable or it's not. When we talked before about the reason that a judge lets in a person's dying declaration, hearsay is not allowed normally, right? We're not allowed to, someone's not allowed to testify to what someone else said unless there's an exception. And the reason, as I said before, that a dying declaration is an exception that the judge will allow the jury to hear is because there is a belief that when someone is close to death or believes they are dying, that they're going to make a statement that is truthful because, whether it be a religious connotation or a belief that someone's just going to want to be honest at the moment they die. The question for the jury is, obviously we don't believe she's lying. I don't think anyone would believe she's lying on her death.
And especially since she knew who Quentin TELLIS was.
The question is whether or not she was in the right frame of mind at the time she made that statement. And also, one of the arguments the prosecutor is going to make is they're going to actually show, I believe, her esophagus.
Yes.
To show how messed up and burnt it was, to indicate how difficult it would have been for the witnesses to really hear what they believed they were hearing.
But then that will be
countered. The problem
they
have is that she said things that they understood.
Right,
I think at
exactly.
one point she says her name, and he doesn't realize, the witness said, she said something like Jessica Chambers, and he realized that he must have missed the last name because of the difficulty in pronouncing it because of the injuries.
Right, but you just
she
hit the
still
nail on the
said
head.
The name.
Well, it
Right.
sounded similar. That was your
Exactly.
point. Quentin,
Exactly.
Eric, that doesn't sound very similar to me.
And then the next question becomes, well, if it's not her esophagus that's a problem, is she even understanding what they're saying? Is she calling out to a boyfriend?
Right.
Is she in her last breath? We don't know.
Very quickly,
yeah.
Jessica. Very quickly, Julie. You're not Jessica. That's the victim. We're going to toss to the trial, but we looked up capital murder because I think one of the big questions here is why are they not seeking the death penalty, and why is he being charged with capital murder? What does that mean? Can you give us a little bit of a rundown here?
It looks like, in this state, capital murder is when an individual is killed during the course, in this specific case, during the course of an arson. And so that's how they were able to make out capital murder. Again, they're not looking for the death penalty. I think they're looking for life without parole, which would, I think, potentially be the result if he's convicted.
Okay, great. So now we're going to just head straight to the trial. The trial